what do you think of Elon's different companies?
Great question. There's probably in our lifetimes not another more impactful company in the history of the world. Like, you better love SpaceX because there's nothing more American than SpaceX. I absolutely hate them more than any.
Two Bid da Vinci, where does that name come from?
Two Bid da Vinci was that combination of.
Ricky, how's it going? How's your day going so far?
Doing all right, Luke. We've got a lot going on this summer, so it's hard to juggle like so many balls and keep everything straight. But I'm trying not to lose my mind and keep everything moving along. But doing well. This morning's been great so far.
I wanted to use this channel to really get to know people, especially YouTubers, because I think with YouTubers, a lot of people don't really get to know the person, especially if they're making specific, like, formatted content. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to get their experience and past with the question of God's existence. For you, I think it's interesting, but what has been your experience with the question of God's existence so far in your life?
So yeah, it's a great question. My parents were. A little bit about my background. I'm Indian, so most Indians are Hindus, probably like 70%, something like that. But there's like this 5% group in India that are Christians, and I think it came from the Portuguese back in like the 1400s. They came and had some missions, and so there's this kind of deep rooted. I mean, that's quite a long time ago. So our family comes from a long line of Christians, and one really cool thing about India is that there's quite a bit of peace. Like we have friends that were Hindus or other religions and stuff, and there was amazing peace amongst them. But growing up, my parents were very religious, very religious. Church all the time. We prayed every night, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously, as you grow up, you kind of lose a little bit of it, you know. And in college and stuff, I wasn't quite as religious as I am now. And I think when you start a family and you have children and stuff, you kind of gravitate back towards God, and you start to realize just how little control that we have, and just how I've always felt his presence. Like, there's no doubt about that. But I mean, what I was actively doing about it has changed over the years.
Some people sort of come to the conclusion of God's existence through experience, and some people do it through, like, evidence-based, especially through apologetics. Has your experience been more what you felt in God, or did you struggle with the sort of science or evidence for God's existence and then came to a conclusion that way?
So when I was in college, and I still love these guys, there were quite a few authors that I followed closely who were very adamant that God does not exist. Like, Richard Dawkins, for example. Who makes some awesome arguments and stuff, and talks about how, like, evolution is, and I 100% believe evolution is 1000% true. It's just that God could have put things in motion and then let it run, right? So anyone who thinks that, like, God walked around and made a giraffe and then made a whale shark and then made a octopus, like, it's silly. It's also very unscientific, or it's kind of a silly way to do it. You're studying computer science. That would be the difference between, like, building a great foundation versus, like, just a bunch of copy and paste code that you did over and over for different purposes that's impossible to maintain and stuff, right? So there's, like, an elegance actually in evolution. So for me, I'm a wildly scientific person, and I love science. The pursuit of science, I think, is basically our greatest accomplishment as a society, civilization. But God, I think, is a different question, because even a world without God and all the science in the world is still a cold and lonely place, and that's where I think for most people God it provides such comfort. And so for me, there's always been kind of like a voice in my head, or there's always been a sense of something, and it's hard to, like, put a finger on. And so for me, it's not dogmatic. Like, I don't think go to this church and give this guy this much money. It's like, there's I'm not sure if you're familiar with, there was the Gospel of Thomas Aquinas, which didn't make the cut for the Bible. Pretty much says something along the lines of, like, if the kingdom of heaven was in the sky, the birds would be closer to it. If it was under you, the fish would be closer. And that's the kingdom of God is within you. It's a personal thing. Now, I do think that religions have taken God and made them like money making schemes. Like, for example, in America, there's all these like prosperity ministers. I absolutely hate them more than anybody on earth. Like I like atheists 10 times more than these prosperity gospel ministers, these guys that run these things out of like big warehouses and just have poor people sending them money and buying for art. It absolutely drives me crazy. So you can use like everything. You can use a hammer for bad or for good. You can build a house or hurt somebody, right? It's the same thing. But I think the beauty of God has always been there. It's just that humanity has a way of kind of ruining things, and that's one of the perfect examples of it.
And you also started a YouTube channel. It's gotten really big now, which is really cool. And you do a lot of really cool animations on those, which I think is really sick. But your channel is Two Bid da Vinci. Where does that name come from? What was the process of coming up with that channel and that name?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I was starting out on YouTube, we didn't know what we were doing. I just know that I wanted to give it a shot. Like I wanted to see if we could make some videos, share something, right? We didn't really have we wasn't fully fleshed out. It was me and one other partner that has since left. And one of the things that I was really into in 20, I don't know, like 15-ish or 16, when we started the channel for a couple of years, didn't really do anything. Then 2017, we started uploading videos. So in 2017, I was really into woodworking. I was building my own kitchen in my old house. And so we thought, oh, let's do some little craft and projects and stuff. I quickly realized it's very unsustainable because it would take me 8 months to build something. I was like, "No, it'd be very difficult to make videos like this. I'm not fast enough. I'm not good enough to do it like that. Also, for me, I'm very pragmatic. I loved woodworking because I needed to make cabinets. I needed to do things. So as soon as those problems were solved, I find myself doing other things. So I like woodworking, but it's not like a passion of mine, right? So then Two Bid da Vinci, the name came from like two bit meaning like don't take yourself too seriously. It's just kind of a rinky-dink type of thing. And Da Vinci because I loved Leonardo da Vinci and the idea of a Renaissance man, somebody who kind of learns about everything. And that's been my philosophy in life is if I see something I just go, wow, like how on earth do you do that? I will try to figure it out. I remember like cabinetry and woodworking seemed impossible. Now it seems very straightforward. How to make YouTube videos, how to make animation seemed crazy. I was a software engineer previously before the YouTube thing, same thing. I saw people writing code and making programs, and it just seemed insane to me, and I wanted to know more about it. So I'm a huge believer that you should be wildly curious in life and follow it up and see what you can learn and keep if you can keep learning fun, it's such good fun. So Two Bit da Vinci was that combination of don't take yourself seriously and a little bit of a Renaissance man. What's funny is that name has stuck really well. And even our logo I haven't changed because I just find it so endearing at this point. But yeah, it's changed. The channel has changed over the years, but somehow the name still I think fits and it sticks with people. People forget my name, but like if I ever meet somebody who recognizes me, they'll be like, "Hey, aren't you Tuba Da Vinci?" Like they might forget Ricky, but nobody forgets Tuba Da Vinci for whatever reason. It's just been impactful.
You also talk a little bit about quantum computing, and I think quite a bit of people get the idea of quantum computing completely wrong. What's do you have a go-to explanation just generally for quantum computing?
So yeah, it's incredibly complicated, right? When you leave the world of Newtonian physics, that kind of makes sense, right? When I throw something in the air, it goes up and comes down. Like we can predict all that kind of stuff. It's very tangible. We can see it. We can monitor it. That's classical physics, and it's amazing. Quantum is insane. No one understands quantum physics. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But Lord knows I don't. But so the real foundation is that while computers work on certainty, so if your hard drive has little, if it's SSD, maybe it has a bunch of little transistors, and you can flip them on or off. And reading these on or offs, you get bits from ones and zeros, and put them in packets of 8 or 16 or 30, 64, and create information out of it, pictures and all this kind of stuff. The power of the quantum bit or the qubit is that there's a level of uncertainty. So instead of imagine like flipping a coin and while it's spinning in the air, there's like a spectrum of it's heads or tails and any of these like infinite number of states in between. And it can exist in that kind of uncertainty. And when you go away from having it either be on or off, which gives you very limited like computing power, you can all of a sudden model the world because if you think about it, the world is a quantum world. So a quantum computer is just going to be better at modeling things like weather, right? Or like molecules in an atom that are vibrating and like the foundational physics stuff is going to be really powerful. So quantum computers are just different. They're not a competitor to. It's not like the Intel and then the AMD, and they do the same thing, but there's this one's 20% faster. They're just way different things, but where they're used is going to be different. Like in your phone in your pocket, probably going to be a classical computer, even in the future, even further into the future. But when you need things like modeling planets and weather or simulations, unlocking like DNA sequencing or like predicting diseases, that the quantum computer will definitely be light years ahead.
There's a really big theory that a lot of people like. The odds of us being in a simulation are pretty high because, like, if we get to a simulation, then there has to be it just like layers down. So if you take the odds, we should be in a simulation. Is quantum computing, would that be used for, like, if you were to simulate like a whole reality, would you use that or classical computing?
It's a great question. The reason why it's a little bit hard to answer is because what we haven't done with quantum computers is build like a rich, robust library and framework system. So you're studying computer science. What the reason why it's so amazing to build an iPhone app today is because millions of people at this point have made libraries to do everything from scanning a picture of your credit card, driver's license, taking a payment. They've made so all you have to do is import and then use the thing, right? So we have these foundational like low level disk IO operating system kind of stuff. Then we have higher level, but we have this entire stack of code that you get on day one with classical computers. We don't have that on the quantum side. Quantum is very bespoke and it depends on who's using it and they're building all this up. But imagine if in the future quantum computers were wildly prolific and we had the same level of maturity, then it'd be easier to answer that question. Until then, it'd be a little bit difficult to answer, but my gut tells me the quantum computer would be better at that.
And is it useful in helping with AI and making AI better?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think it would be. So a lot of what AI does, there's a lot of matrix multiplication, and you've got like weights and nodes, and you have to kind of um, and train these models and handle all this stuff. I think that's something that quantum computers could do quite well. Um, it would again, you'd have to retrain them or rebuild them. You'd have to change the data structures, like how things are actually coded and how they're stored. But I think AI would benefit greatly from quantum computers.
And right now, AI is taking up a bunch of power on our power grid. Um, and you seem to say that, like, this could be a really big problem because we have so much power being taken up. Do you think that AI might just solve its own problem, though, that it's it is taking up so much power, but it will be like one of the biggest tools that will help us come up with a different energy source to replace that power?
Yeah, so that definitely is the promise, or that's what is people hope will happen, and yeah, I think there's a world where that might be true. Of all the use cases that AI is being used for, finding a new form of energy doesn't seem like exactly the kind of pattern recognition or like generative, like large data set training type of use case. Like, I mean, it's difficult for us too, right? We have hydrogen and we have different, nuclear fuels that we can make steam out of. We have coal and oil and gas. I mean, like, I don't even know where an AI would get started on finding an alternative to that. So currently, AI is not particularly clever. It's just very well versed, and it's able to regurgitate. It's able to like take something that it's seen before and give you like something in the middle or something else. But what AI is not going to do at this point, anyway, is write the next Shakespearean tragedy or something. But instead, what it could do is, if you have an idea in your head, it can help you write chapters or sections and stuff, right? So it's it's a little bit derivative in that way at this point. Now, obviously, these are the early days, and we might have general AI, right? Gen AI can change all that. So let's hope that's true. But in this gold rush, that video that I made, my argument was whenever you have a gold rush, responsibility goes out the window, right? People aren't like, well, we really should consider how much energy this is using, and if we have enough power to power it all, they're not going to do that. They're going to be like, consequences be damned, go build data centers, and everyone's going to want a piece of this because whoever figures this out That's, it's trillions of dollars probably in value. So whenever you have a gold rush, you got to be careful because environmentalism or, like responsibility kind of goes out the window.
And do you think there's a viable solution to how much energy we're using up with AI?
Yeah, I mean, everything's improving. Like the latest generation NVIDIA chips are really amazing. The compute per watt is up dramatically. And, there's also like co-location schemes where companies are thinking, well, why don't we build these like in the Arctic Circle or like in the north of Finland or something um, where cooling isn't really a problem? Because that's a huge part of this cost is cooling. I have actually, here it is. I have this tiny little, and this is such a great analogy for like electronics. This is a 10 gigabit networking card, so it's Thunderbolt for my MacBook on one end. This takes the Ethernet cable on the other side, and it provides 10 gigabit, which we have 10 gigabit in here, but MacBooks don't have that cable. So this thing, I could cook an egg on this thing as soon as you plug it in. And this is like the simplest little thing. Electronics just get hot, and it comes from a lot of things. It's material losses, any kind of switching, if there's any kind of inverting or voltage regulation, all these power electronics equipment just get hot, right? So the computing farms, the servers that AI is housed in, you can imagine how much cooling requirements there are. And if they're not using heat pumps to pump in AC, then they're using like evaporative coolers and they're using tons and tons of water. So if we could put these in places where cooling isn't a problem, like they've built these on boats, like in the ocean type of thing, to use ocean as a cooling source. But again, you're producing heat where there wasn't heat before. Um, that's the issue. And obviously, the trade off is you want them close to where you need them. So a lot of our data centers are like near Virginia. Why? Washington, D.C., New York, stock exchanges. It's near where people need it. That way the latency is very, very low. And that's the trade-off that you got to figure out. There's no cold places in California, for example. Like we don't have that option. The Pacific Ocean maybe is our best bet.
Yeah, maybe we could put it up on the mountains we got because like Figueroa Mountain is kind of near where I am, and it snows there every once in a while. At least you can maybe put them up there. But do you think the best? So nuclear fusion is kind of came up with a breakthrough like a year ago. Do you think that is viable, or do you think we're too far away from that to have any effect on AI's power consumption?
So yeah, nuclear fusion is the holy grail. It's like the thing that we have kind of off in the distance that the crown on the hill. It is going to be amazing, and I think it's actually maybe even in our lifetimes. I think you're a lot you're younger than me, but I think in our lifetimes it's actually possible. Yeah, we're close. We can sustain like a fusion reactor for small periods of time. What we haven't really sorted out yet is how we get more energy out than in. And there have been some breakthroughs, and most importantly, there's just a ton of research right now because it seemed a lot more distant before, but now there's like Helion. There's quite a few companies that are pursuing this. Many in the UK. My buddy Matt Farrell, who runs YouTube channel, did a little tour where he went to three of them within like 100-mile radius of each other. And as we build these like massive super colliders and we keep continuing our investment in this stuff, I do think, man, that'll be a sweet day because nuclear fission, what we have now is was a starting point, but it has a lot of problems, especially because the waste fuel requires tens of thousands of years of management. And if there's one thing governments are not good at, especially like in America, is thinking long term. Like they love spending the money and do it. They'll give you money to build whatever you want today, but you tell them, oh, and by the way, have a little guard or a little water pumps or a cooling system or something for the next 10,000 years over here. That'd be great. Like, what are you talking about now? Like, I'm worried about a 4-year election cycle, right? So that hasn't been perfect. It's been amazing. I'm a fan of nuclear fission for what it's done for us, but fusion, man, what a game changer that would be.
And what do you think the biggest products you've covered a bunch of different products or inventions that seem to be coming out? What do you think the most promising one that you've seen, made a video on, or maybe just not made a video on so far?
So fusion and there's so many you could pick from, and that's part of the fun of this channel is I get to cover the most cool, brilliant people doing some of the craziest stuff you can imagine. I will say, I think one thing I'm really interested in is I made a video with a company called Aduro Clean Technologies, and they have this um, full closed loop cycle of recycling plastic. Sorry, excuse me one second. I need to sneeze. Maybe I do. But they have this really cool process, and it takes plastic input. You don't have to clean out the ketchup and stuff, right? That's the hardest thing right now. Any impurities in plastic just ruin recycling. It's a shame. It doesn't really matter for aluminum, for example, because you can just melt it and whatever residue is going to just melt off and separate. But we don't want to melt plastic. That's pyrolysis, which has been done in the past, because when you melt plastic, unlike aluminum, which is just a pure metal, when you melt it and then cool it, you have aluminum again. Like you can do that for the rest of time. Plastic is this long polymer chain, and the quality of the polymers degrade over time as you melt them. So that's why if you have beautiful Legos to start, and then you do the melting recycling process, you don't get Legos again. You get crappy gray plastic because all the colors blend together that you use for secondary applications that aren't that important. And then the next time it's probably just garbage, right? So Duro system is a hydrochemical process that actually returns it back to like the liquid, like it looks like a fuel basically. The early the primer for plastic all over again. So you go from plastic, uh, raw based product back to the original stuff at the end. So it's a really awesome technology. And if you think about plastic, I've recently realized how amazing plastic is, but we have a huge plastic problem we got to sort out. And if we're going to keep using plastic, we need something to allow us to not be making such a mess of it as we have for the past 70 years or so.
And what on plastic, there's a little like number on it with the little recycling thing. And that's like how many times I think you can keep on recycling it. With the Duros thing you were talking about, does it not have like, does that not number not change each time you recycle it?
So that number system, I covered that in my video, by the way. It's fascinating. That logo is not the recycling logo. It is intentionally, deceptively made to look like it. It is the plastic resin identification code. It is not a recycling logo, but does it look like the recycling logo? Yeah, it does, right? And that number identifies what the plastic is, right? So there's PVCs and ABS and probably polypropylene and polyethylene, and all these plastics are different. That's why the aluminum analogy would be like, imagine if we had aluminum cans and copper cans and tin cans and all these different metals, right? They'd have to be treated differently. Like you can't just blend them together. And plastic is kind of the same. So what some people will do is they'll have to separate plastics and into like plastics of ones and twos. So that number identifies also how hard it is to recycle, like how difficult the chains are to break or how hard they are to maintain on the other end. So that is a code that tells you the ease of recyclability and what type of plastic you're dealing with.
And you talk quite a bit about, I think one of your most viewed videos is talking about Tesla, and that's Elon's company, and he has a whole bunch of other companies like Neuralink, Boring Company, SpaceX, and Tesla, obviously. Do you have like a favorite, or what do you think of Elon's different companies?
Such such a polarizing person, and it's kind of a shame because I'm a firm believer. And maybe I'll ask you this: can you love the art and not the artist?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think separating art from artist is something that a lot of people don't do. But it's a little bit different if the artist is like, if you're buying something that is producing something, like you're buying something that it took bad things to make that happen. Like, I mean, like Hershey's or Apple. I feel like I don't even do this, but like the amount of like sweatshops and child labor that companies do when you're buying something, it's kind of promoting that. So I think that's a little bit different, but I think separating the art from the artist, you can obviously admire what somebody did as an act or as like an art and not admire who they are as a person.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say the rising mentality or the growing sentiment today is that people can't do that. I will not buy a Tesla because I don't agree with Elon Musk. It's like, well, let's start with Tesla. Tesla, there's probably in our lifetimes not another more impactful company in the history of the world, like in on Earth, anywhere. In our lifetimes, for sure. There's nobody would have believed you that you could make vehicles and get rid of the petroleum industry, right? Look what GM, like other companies who kind of fiddled with it, but they didn't have the guts to continue. And under pressure, probably from like oil companies, they were taking the EV ones back, or there's been all this whole history of taking these cool innovative cars and just scrapping them. Not even like, oh, we're not going to continue to make them, we're not going to continue to support them. No, I'm taking your car and I'm going to scrap it, which is insane. What other company have you ever heard of doing that, right? It is very it's very shady, to be honest. Tesla comes along, no one believes that they'll do it, and they freaking do it. And Elon's a huge part of that because he does have a unique way, I think, of doing things, and he has kind of the Steve Jobs, I call it kind of the reality distortion field, where he
Mm.
will not take no for an answer. And everybody else will be like, no, that's not possible. You can't put enough of these little batteries in a car. He's like, yes, you can, and you will, and we will, and it'll happen like this. Blah. And he just has that reality distortion field that all brilliant people, I think, invariably have. You have to be crazy. Like, you have to believe when there really is no reason to believe that something is possible. So Tesla is amazing for that reason. I actually just bought a new Tesla. I upgraded my first Tesla, and in my head I was like, oh boy, here we go. Let's see how hard it is to get the car to show up on my app, to remove the old car, because I have both. They're all on your phone, the phone key, the supercharging, all this stuff is connected very digitally. Took me 2 minutes, dude. It was like, take this picture of your driver's license, take a picture of the title, take a picture of this, done, done, done. Go, okay, give me done. Car's on. Your old car's done. Welcome. It was no other car company can do that. Not one. There's no company other than Tesla that is anywhere close to as genius when it comes to the software component. It's not even close. And then the cars themselves, if I'm honest with you, are the panel gaps and stuff a problem? Yes, but I just trust their engineering. It's really good, right? SpaceX, let's go. So Tesla changed the world like nobody else. We are talking about electric vehicles. They're 15% of sales. And whether you like the Hyundai whatever or the Mercedes EQS, that's fine. But none of those cars exist. Mercedes and Hyundai, none of those companies would have ever done that if it wasn't for one single company, Tesla. And that's why I'll always love them. And two, let's talk about SpaceX, right? America, the greatest country in the world. We were going to Kazakhstan and launching on Russian Soyuz rockets after like before SpaceX. That's what we were doing. America. We didn't have launch capabilities. That's insane to me. Anybody who's a patriot or loves America or whatever, you better love SpaceX because there's nothing more American than SpaceX, right? Because something about, yeah, when anybody needs to launch anything, they come to America and use space. That just sounds right, does it not? To me, that's what we've always been about. And it's crazy that again a private company did that. Because before him and SpaceX, we were going to Kazakhstan. This is insane to me. It's insane that they don't get more credit for this. And all he gets credit for is all this stuff he says. And you can like him or hate him. It doesn't really matter, right? Because your opinion of Elon is your own. Have whatever opinion you want. It doesn't really change the outcome of the companies that he started. Neuralink, I don't think about as much. It's kind of creepy and dystopic and a little bit eerie, but again, incredible research happening. If somebody has any kind of a mental or neurological condition that prevents them from living a vibrant life, and this can change that, what could matter more, right? And Boring Company, I think, again, just rethinking how we build cities. Why do we need congested roads on surfaces? It's interesting. Those are much less mature and further down the road. But I mean, like everything he does is kind of radical. Like he's not building a better mousetrap. That's never what Elon does, right? He doesn't go, hey, this is pretty great, but it'd be better is if this handle was a little bit taller. Like he does not care about that. He is talking about like SpaceX. What if America could launch everything for the world again, like we used to, like or like what if we, it's he's a cool dude. He's an interesting dude. Buying Twitter, again, I don't think that was your question, so we don't need to get into the politics if you don't want to. I am happy to if you want, but
No,
you
I
got
love
to
the
separate.
politics.
You got
The
to separate the art from the artist. You really do, right?
I I do love politics. Like Elon buying Twitter was, I think, one of the most interesting choices he could have made out of all the different things and companies he's done. It makes sense a little bit with like he's kind of a futurist with like protecting humanity. His whole philosophy is protecting human consciousness, and he believes that freedom of speech is the best way and one of the definitive ways to get into that. So buying Twitter to create like a good sustainable freedom of speech sort of area is makes sense. But what I wanted to ask you before we end this is I have this list of people that I think are modern day geniuses, and you're in this engineering field, and I think like geniuses for a modern day genius, it would have to be somebody that is like way up past anybody else in their field. One of the people like on the YouTube space, like Mr. Beast is king of entertainment, not even close. Like I think he's entertainment genius. Nobody even is anywhere near what he does in that. So I would call him like an entertainment genius. But do you think Elon has that title of being like the number one in like the engineering field compared to like anyone else, and it's not really close?
So the one argument that I've heard from people is that Elon doesn't so for example, there's like a I'm not sure how large the contingent is, but there are people who believe Elon doesn't do anything. He just hires all these smart people and then sits around and takes all the credit. Now, I've never been at SpaceX or Tesla while anything was going on to know, right? So I will say, in terms of is he an engineering genius, I've never seen like pencils down. Let me check your work. I've never checked his work, if you will, right? So I will say though that we have brilliant people already. The much scarcer resource is, like I mentioned, that reality distortion field or the crazy wild vision. That is a much scarcer resource. Like if you're looking for like the most brilliant physics minds, mathematics, engineering, science, there's a lot in this world. Like the levels of education that just in America, but around the world, like there are brilliant people everywhere. So why don't we have more brilliant things happening? Someone's got to bring some brilliant pieces together and stick it, put the puzzle pieces together and have some wild idea, get funding for it, make it desirable. That's the other thing about Tesla is like this car that I bought, it's a newer model, but it looks almost identical to a car they made in 2012. What other car like 12 years later would still be beautiful? So you have to have something like that people want, right? We've had other like Priuses don't sell very well because nobody wants to drive a Prius. I mean, there was a time when like Leonardo DiCaprio drove one, but now the pure electric stuff is way cooler, and the Prius is just an ugly, slow. Well, the newer one is better, but my point is, you have to make something desirable too. Like SpaceX is just cool. I see people who have SpaceX like badges on their cars, right? Like that level of passion and fire is something that's hard to like Apple. People love Apple, right? You can whatever you want to say. Um, People have a strong reaction to Apple. They will pay the extra to get that product. So that's what really helps you for commercial success. And you have to have commercial success if you want to change the world. You can't just, oh, this is an important product that nobody wants to buy. Well, then you haven't really done it, right? It's only half the equation. So I'm not sure about the genius in terms of engineering and stuff. I just don't know, right? Probably. I'm guessing he's pretty dang smart. But what he does for sure have is vision. And that is much scarcer a resource than brilliant like science and math minds.
Yeah, I think it's hard to detect who really is the geniuses of modern time because we only really see the public ones. Like you could, I doubt the people like during the old geniuses we think of knew of that person when like they were actually alive because first of all they didn't really have the communication we have now, but um, yeah, it's just kind of hard to gauge until like we kind of have to go into the future, then look back to see like what things they came up with. Because I think there's like a crap ton of really, really smart people just like doing research with like a group, and they're not really recognized that much. Besides, maybe they get like a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. And but yeah, I think it would be kind of hard to gauge that. Do you? I'm gonna be linking all your channel and everything else down below. I think that's all the time you have. Do you have any last thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, Luke. So I was thinking about one last thing, just to tie into what you had mentioned. The other thing the one thing I've been thinking about more recently is scientific mathematician, like really brilliant minds are typically very introverted, right?
Mm,
They're they're not gonna go out and, you know. And then on the other side of the equation, the less brilliant, like people like and I'm not bashing on anybody, but like salespeople, for example, are the
yeah,
most. I mean, they will convince you that that wall is blue if it's red. I mean, they're just unbelievable sources of energy, right? If you ever ask a physicist, like, "Hey, how sure are you?" They'll, "Oh, I don't know, probably not." Like like scientists, engineers are just by nature very low confidence, right? Like we just don't
yeah.
believe. Like in this video that I just made this week, a scientist made a discovery, and the numbers were so crazy that he said, "You screwed it up. Go do it again. You screwed it up. Do it again." Like their first thought is, "No, this is wrong. Like this can't." Even when you do something right or good, your first thought is, "Ah, this is probably a fluke." Whereas like super extroverts or crazy confident, they'll, you know, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect if you're familiar with that. The more you know about something, the less confident you are, and the less you know about something, the more confident you are, right? If you ever see anybody coming around talking about how they have the answer for healthcare and whatever, it's like you probably haven't thought about it very much, because the more you think about it, you'll realize there's nuance and stuff. But it kind of ties into the thing. What if all the geniuses that we give credit for in history, Nikola Tesla or all the way back to Da Vinci, what if Da Vinci had this like savant, like autistic, crazy genius behind, employee who was just feeding him stuff and who would never even go into public. And Da Vinci was just walking around taking all the credit. Who knows, right? I mean, that's the thing. History is a funny thing. I take most of history with a little bit of a grain of salt because you know the victors write the history books. You know the until lions get their history books, all stories will favor the hunter, right? That type of thing.
Mm.
So it's hard to say. But I think by nature, the geniuses that you're talking about, you might not even recognize them or know them because they just don't seek the credit the way the non-geniuses are much better at.